Welcome to the Heart-Centered Entrepreneur Podcast. I want you to be rich. Yes, I want abundant financial success for your business. But I don't just care about your business making money. I care about you too. I want you to be rich in happiness, in the impact you make, in your relationships, and in how you give back. I'm Anna. I built my six-figure business as a side hustle while I was pregnant with my daughter in 2016. Now I've helped dozens of women do the same. I'm here to help you build a profitable, heart-centered, fully booked business with the latest tips on sales and visibility, with proven mindset hacks, and sneak peeks behind the scenes with what's working right now in the online space and in my business. Ready to make more money with heart? Let's go. Friends, I'm leveled and excited to introduce Alexis to you, who we finally pulled out in front of the camera and mic. She's usually behind the camera and mic because Alexis is a podcast manager who helps busy entrepreneurs, thought leaders, creatives craft impactful podcasts. Look at this. She specializes in podcast launches, ongoing management, and combines professional audio, engaging video, and seamless workflows to save her clients time and boost their visibility. She's also just an amazing, empathetic, kind, I don't know a human as real as Alexis. So I'm just so excited to introduce you to her. Tell us about yourself.
Oh my gosh, I think I'm going to cry.
Please.
Oh man. So yes, I'm Alexis. I am a podcast manager. I used to be a TV news producer and
I did not know this. I learned something new.
Yeah, I used to be a TV news producer, did it for a couple years, knew early on that I didn't want to do it. And after that, went to travel. And then that's when I got into the world of podcasting. I saw people working remotely and I was like, I need to do that. And so here I am.
I am so excited. So Alexis is a good friend and client of mine, but I love these because I'm just excited to get to know you. So I'm going to be asking you questions just that I'm curious about, because what I admire about you is, yes, you have this beautiful podcasting agency, but you also are a digital nomad. And that's a different type of freedom than as a single mom than I currently experience in this season of my life, right?
Sure.
I experience freedom another way. But I think a lot of our listeners do aspire to live a digitally nomadic life. And I think there's a lot of mystery behind that. What does that actually look like? So I'm just excited to dive in.
Yeah, me too. Let's do it.
Okay. So first question is, how is working remotely as a podcast manager allowed you to embrace travel? What are some of the favorite places you worked from, et cetera?
So I embraced travel before I started working remotely. It was something that I wanted to do and saw other people doing it and was like, how the heck can I do that? And after leaving my job as a news producer, I went to go visit a friend in New Zealand, and basically the rest is history. I was seeing all these people work remotely and I was like, oh my gosh, if I can continue to work remotely and travel, then this is my path. I just knew something in me that was what I was supposed to do. And I did that. So yeah.
What gave you I guess my question is what gave you the courage? Because really the only traveling I did when I was young was going to Europe with one of my girlfriends, right? But I think how old were you when you first started working remotely, and what gave you the courage to do it?
So how old was I? Oh my gosh. Late 20s. I think it was 27. And what gave me the courage was I just hated my job. I was like, oh my gosh, how the heck do I get out of this? Something in me knew that I was meant for more, and my job in a corporate environment wasn't it. And I don't know. I just had this thought of there has got to be more than going to this job, going to the gym, coming back, eating, and then repeat. Oh, there's no way. So my friend knew that I was struggling and she's like, why don't you come out to visit me? And you don't have to stay for long. And initially it was supposed to be 6 months and it went into 2 years. And I was like, all right, well, this is definitely the path.
When you went to go visit her, were you, because I mean, obviously it's totally different, but I had something similar. When I moved back to San Diego, I actually was coming back to host an in-person retreat and workshop. And then I just had this feeling in my gut of I need to stay. So I canceled my plane tickets back, essentially.
I would do that. I would do that.
So I know it's different, but was it a little bit of that vibe of I think I want to stay here longer? Or at what point did it turn into the 2 years?
So after I left my job, I went to work in a restaurant in New Zealand. And I was like, this is not what I went to school for, but I don't even care. I was like, I left a very stressful job. And at this point I was like, whatever, I'm in a different country. I'm going to embrace whatever happens. And I just went into it with the mindset of, okay, this is like a vacation. But then I started to learn, oh, wait, this isn't a vacation. This is more of a lifestyle. I'm figuring out where to go grocery shopping, where to eat, how to maintain a healthy living and all the things. And I think after meeting some other people who were working at the restaurant who were doing like um, the digital nomad life or backpacking, that's when I was like, okay, what? I didn't know this was a thing. Like, how did I not know this? And they were much younger at the time, some early 20s, some were even in their teens. And I'm like, what? How did I not know? So that's kind of where it all started.
I love that you just showed up, right? Though that you were like, okay, I'm going to show up and like make money where I am. Because I think in the online space, it does this like hierarchy of things of like, some money is better than others, or like it's better to be a coach than a VA, or it's better to be an online business owner than have a traditional day job. And I just think like, no, like as women, like just make money how you want to make money and is aligned. So I love that you were like, I'm going to move to New Zealand. Okay, here I am. I'm going to work in a restaurant. Okay, here I am. I want to start doing this thing, right? And just like having a lot of like willingness to like live in the moment and have a lot of self-trust. Like, have you always had that ability, or have you been risk averse at times? Or tell me about that.
No, in fact, I was very by the books with everything. Like I was the kind of person who would rat on myself for cheating on a test. Like, so doing something outside of my comfort zone wasn't something that I was used to, but I was just very curious. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't making me happy. And it's like almost making my skin crawl. How do I do something else that brings me joy? And at that time, I was like, well, traveling, like, why not? My friend had just moved to New Zealand, picked up with, her whole life and moved there with 2 bags. And that was really inspiring for me. And so she's had a major impact on my whole life. We didn't know it at the time, but yeah, as I kept going, things started happening in my favor. And I was like, what? I didn't know that I was capable of living this type of lifestyle, that I was capable of having this type of joy. And most importantly, too, which was major, was meeting my people, like people who understood me, who just, they were so open, non-judgmental. And I was like, so it was new to me. So I was like, oh, this is so great. Like, how do I keep doing it? And so yeah, I just kept going with my gut, really.
It just takes so much. Like, I agree with you. I think that's amazing, but I just think you're not even recognizing like how much self-trust and faith that takes so much faith to be like, most people aren't doing that, right? Which isn't necessarily right or wrong, but like, it really takes a lot of faith. And I love how you said, like, you just followed those small breadcrumbs, right? Like, I resonate with that in my journey too. Like I remember like one of my girlfriends like had a Beachbody Facebook group, and I was like, what's a Facebook group? Maybe I should start one for what I'm doing. And I, like,
Yeah.
but like I think sometimes we see women that are successful and we think they had these like big flashing lights, but I don't think it was that at all. I think it was like, one friend had this thing, or we're just following these tiny particles of like hope too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and also I grew up very what's the word? Um not restricted. There's a my I didn't do much clearly as a kid. And so I thought to me like, oh, that's normal. But when you start meeting people who are doing things that are different, you start questioning, and the curiosity just keeps growing. And I just think it's so important to follow that no matter what you're doing, because there's just so many highs that are to come from that. And I just think a lot of people do get a little fearful of what's going to happen. And you just kind of have to like embrace it and go for it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think like the more you embrace it, the easier it is to do, because then you start seeing evidence of like,
Yes.
oh, I took that risk and hey, it paid off. Like, oh, like you start building evidence
Right.
of like the scary thing leads to goodness.
Yes, exactly. That's what I did.
You did it. Okay. What mindset shifts have been the most important, do you feel like, in helping you grow your business as a podcast manager? I know you like alluded a little bit to like, okay, like feeling inspired by other digital nomads in New Zealand, but like what do you feel like really helped shift you there?
I think first when I started my own business, I had no idea the amount of personal development that was going to happen.
No one warns us.
Like what that would have been a great warning sign, because half the things that I have worked through, I just didn't know was an issue until you're dealing with it in your own business. And I'm like talking things about like believing in yourself and being okay with giving 50% that day and accepting that that was your 100% of the day. Like that was really big for me. And then also too, just having a community of people. I'm very, I guess I'm one of those people who I'm like, okay, I can do it. I can do it. I don't need help. It's all right, which is so unhealthy. Learn that. But it's just one of those things that you're just like, wow, okay, there's other people who get it. And that helped me really grow as a person. My mindset was like, it was almost like a calming effect to my brain. Like, okay, there's other people, you're not alone. And it sounds so like general, but I mean, really, I think those little things really helped. I don't even know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you answered it perfectly.
Okay.
And I totally agree. I think like we get into online business, obviously, like to make money, but I think like the side effect is that we become better, stronger, more confident humans as women. And it reminds me of almost like of motherhood. Like I got into motherhood, obviously, to have children, but like the nice side effect is you have to work on a lot of your own personal stuff.
Right.
And so I think there is a point in entrepreneurship where you're like, oh my God, like this is going to be a refining fire. Am I sure I want this? Am I sure?
Yeah.
But then you realize like, wow, like what a beautiful benefit that like not only is me working on my negative self-talk and my perfectionism helping my business and helping me make money, but also so helping me be a better human and a more confident woman and more of who I was really born to be.
Yeah, exactly. Those were things that I just didn't even realize would happen. It was like a really great side effect.
Nice surprise.
Yeah, from just following your own curiosity, and going with it.
I love that. Okay. So when you think about your role as a podcast manager, what are like some of the behind the scenes you like to handle for your clients? Like maybe even take us through like a day to day in the life. Maybe even someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, what is it like for someone to be on the back end of this recording and editing and the setup? I was telling you, like, I'm able to do a lot of my own tech setup because I'm pretty tech savvy because of I actually did an internship at a TV station in
Cool.
college and did some radio stuff. But the average entrepreneur, they just want to record and hand you the audio file, right?
Right.
And the blessing about what you do is you really handle all of that back end. So maybe run us through some of what you do and offer.
Sure. So I offer a range of services, but I'm usually taking on the editing. I'm writing the show notes for the shows. Depending on the client and where they are in their journey, I will either launch from scratch, help them launch from scratch, or we're just continuing ongoing management. But sometimes that includes me coaching them through the setup or recommending certain equipment. I am pretty transparent with clients. So if their audio is not sounding too good, I'll usually say something and make a suggestion and try to make it sound as good as we can. The setup is hard for a lot of people. And so usually what I do is I send a list of equipment that I think would work. And usually there's a few price ranges in there depending on the goal, but that usually can be very helpful. Sometimes they have no equipment and this is just the thing they need. And other times they're looking to upgrade their equipment and there's things that I've listed on there as well. But yeah, and then just helping them stay accountable, really. I think that's a hard one for most people. Usually if I am keeping track and I don't get a file, I'll be like, hey,
Did you record your podcast episode yet?
Yeah. So a little bit of everything really, but it really depends based on the client and what they need. And sometimes it's only audio, sometimes it's only video, and other times it's both. So it's a little bit of this and that with each client.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like this is just like my personal opinion, but I feel like there's some things in online business, like as entrepreneurs, like we can DIY or outsource. But I tell my clients, like a podcast is just something that is there's so many moving parts and so many technicalities. I recommend to my clients, like, wait until you can pay someone and then pay someone to do it. Because I just think like, so there's some things like Instagram where there's a little bit less of a learning curve, less of equipment, right? But I just feel like a podcast, if you can from day one, that's why it's just so nice to handle those elements. Like what are some of the, but it doesn't seem that way. It seems like, oh, podcast is so easy. Like, what do you think are some of the elements that people assume are going to be easy about a podcast, but aren't?
Oh my gosh, just recording. They think, oh, I can just, grab whatever and record. Or when I first started and I was working with clients in a different scale than I am now, some people were using just headphones to record. And I was like, oh no, like this is bad. Or like they would use one mic and there's two hosts and you're just like, oh my gosh, editing wise, this is a nightmare. And that's because, what they don't realize is like, I need to edit both files separately because maybe someone coughed in one audio file or someone sneezed in the other. And it's like, if it's combined, I can't take out, or I mean, I can, but it's going to cut out the other person who's speaking. So it's just little nuances in how everything works with the podcasting. And I think a lot of people overestimate how much time it takes in general, just from setting it up, from recording, coming up with episodes, and especially if people are doing it themselves. They get very easily overwhelmed because there are just so many moving parts. And which is also why I suggest people to start with audio first, just to get that going, get familiar and comfortable, and then ease into video, not just jump straight into it.
Absolutely. Like under no circumstances should you start a video podcast.
No.
Immediately. Like it's just, and even like you said, like setting up like your host, like Libsyn, right? Like setting up those pieces are just so many moving parts. I think it's worth it. And I love a podcast so much. I highly recommend having them, but I just think it's like mindfully going in when you're ready to invest a little bit in support so that you can be consistent with it, so that you can, not feel overwhelmed with all the like technical elements, have someone by your side, right? I'm curious too, like, what are some of the, like, since you work with entrepreneurs, right, that have podcasts and like maybe they're like slow to getting episodes to you, and maybe it's not so much the time, but maybe like they're nervous about the visibility piece. Like, what are some of the like fears or visibility blocks that you've seen your clients and or entrepreneurs or even yourself experienced as you're using your voice and sharing it in a platform like a podcast?
Well, I think it's so easy for people to get wrapped up in numbers. And when you start a podcast, the numbers aren't going to be anywhere where you think they're going to be.
They're going to be zero when you start.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very low. And sometimes it's low for like a while. And, I think people, when they're not seeing something within a few months, they start freaking out. And it's like, no, this is a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. And also even a year later, sometimes it's still not there. It's all about consistency, and which is so annoying because so many people say that, but it is, unfortunately. And I just think continuously showing up is what I usually suggest, but I think people get very down on the fact that this isn't doing what they thought it was going to do, or especially with those who want to monetize. And they're just like, man, I've been doing this for like 2 years and my downloads have decreased, or I can't get me a sponsor. Like it's definitely harder than what some of the bigger podcasters make it look, because they're out here with a whole team and you just can't compare. And so I think that has been the biggest mindset block for people. And I've seen people who are actually, their content is so good, but because they're not seeing these numbers or they're not getting sponsorships, they quit. And it's like, no, like, you are doing so good. And it's like one of those people when you know that they are going to be big, and if they only continue to go, that eventually it would happen, but they just didn't see what they wanted and they decided to kind of put it on the back burner. And it's kind of a bummer.
It's so interesting, right? Because I think it comes from like, there's not as much of this, but I feel like especially 5 years ago, there was a lot of message in the online space of like sneeze and make money, or start a podcast and instantly they're like, build it and they will come. Right. And it's never been the case. But I think especially as the online world is getting better, it's especially not the case, right? Like everyone who has an audience has had to build their audience, unless they're like a celebrity from a reality TV show, or like everyone has had to build it either through paid advertising or organic marketing. And so I think it is interesting, like starting any platform, an Instagram account, a podcast, and then expecting overnight, people aren't here, so I'm not going to show up, instead of me showing up, especially with I feel like a podcast too, like it can be a growth tool when you have guests on, but I think a podcast is even more of like a conversion nurture tool than it is like a growth tool necessarily, right? For me, I have loved like growing my audience through organic marketing, social media marketing, and then using my podcast to build relationship and nurture my audience.
Mhm.
Obviously, it doesn't have to be used that way, right? But it's just often that way. And so I think when people place this expectation on a podcast, like it has to be everything, right?
Right.
It's almost like if we put the expectation on social media to be this really deep platform, we're never going to feel in social media like we feel here hanging out in someone's earbuds, right?
Right.
So it's almost like we're expecting it's almost like we're expecting one of our children to meet all of our needs instead of like, no, as a family, we all work together. Have you seen that? Or what are your thoughts there?
So maybe this is my hot take, but
Take it, give it.
I think if you really just want to see all this growth, or I don't know, if you want to start a podcast, I'm like, I hope I don't regret saying that. Yeah, say it. But I almost think it's better if you have a team or if there's other people. It's not just you, unless you are so unbelievably passionate about this podcast, like it is calling your name to just start and it's you, then go for it. But I just think I've seen it too many times where it is just the one person and maybe they do have one other person that works with them, but they're not seeing what they want to see with the podcast. And then they just kind of give up on it. And I think when you have a team, somebody to edit, somebody to collaborate with, somebody to do the social media promotions, it makes it so much easier and more enjoyable for you because you can solely focus on the content versus all the moving parts. Unless like you're just trying to get into a flow of just putting stuff out there. It's a little messy, but you're just doing it for consistency, fine. As long as that's not what you do forever. Eventually we want quality over quantity.
Yes.
But if you're just trying to get yourself out there, oh my gosh, it's so much better to just do it and then refine as you go. Because podcasting in general, you are going to be constantly evolving. So that's my hot take. Is like, okay, if you really want to get into it, maybe consider it if you have more people working with you on it. But if it's just you, unless you're unbelievably passionate and you feel called to do this, then I say yes, but it's just a lot of work and it can be very draining if it's just you.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think I see the same thing as like entrepreneurs who start their business and like try to build this like giant website by themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you want to create, unless you're like unbelievably tech savvy from like a former life or something, right? I think like it really is remembering most people who are not podcast managers themselves, right? Like you go into business because you're passionate about something,
right?
Health coaching, life coaching, business, whatever it is, right? And so as much as you can focus on that thing is useful. And so that's what hiring a podcast manager does. Is it hiring a website designer, it helps you stay in that zone of genius, especially in things that are a little bit more involved or techie, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's just so many ways that you can go about having the podcast, but it's so sad when I see somebody who's so driven initially and then they're just like, no, this isn't what I thought. And then they're kind of like over it. I'm like,
yes,
there's so many different factors. It's not even just your content,
Yes, I think I agree. Going and starting a podcast, writing a book, I think they're powerful tools, but they should not be taken lightly. I mean, how often do we do that on entrepreneurship? We're like, oh, this little thing is not going to be a big deal. And then we're like, I kind of did that with my book, right? I was like, oh, it's going to take 4 months. It took a year, right? Like,
right.
But that's everything. We're always like, I can get these 19 things done on my to-do list. And we're like, I did 4 and now I'm a failure. You're not a failure. You did 4 big things. It's just that have you ever had that experience, or what advice would you have for women that in their business or in their life feel like they're biting off more than they can chew and or having unrealistic expectations for themselves?
Well, I would like after you've committed and or you started doing the podcast, or like you're like thinking
just
about
general business tasks.
Man, I feel like I've been dealing with this myself. And I think just taking a moment to just collect my thoughts, especially, that's what I have to do, is just be like, okay, what matters right now? Like, what can I prioritize right now? Like, I just sent you the list of things and I'm like, I need to prioritize this.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that I've never done. So basic, but like, I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Now I know exactly what I need to focus on and I can throw out whatever else doesn't matter right now. But I think also looking at things in short periods of time, like, okay, January, let me figure out what to do in January. What can I focus on? Where can I put my energy? And then once that's done, okay, February, same thing. And then just kind of take it from there. But honestly, baby steps, like just small tasks that are doable, helps me get back into the groove of things instead of feeling completely overwhelmed by taking on too much.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think like we're not taught this. I mean, maybe if we took entrepreneurship in school or something, but like when we start a business, we don't realize I have to learn project management skills, right?
Yeah.
And I'm playing different roles, right?
Mhm.
You are the CEO of your business, and sometimes you're the editor, and you're a team manager. And so it is this interesting prioritization that we probably don't have to do in a traditional day job, right? We just have one main role for the most part.
Right.
So it is interesting to be like, here's these multiple roles. How do I balance these well? And especially, I think in small business, like our work is ebbing and flowing and not always within our control. We can't always have control over when clients sign, on when like we work with humans.
Right. Right.
And we can't control, we have some control over like we're doing our marketing, so we're more likely to sign clients, right? But we can't always control what weeks are going to be wild, what aren't. What are some of the things you have found over the past few years to regulate yourself or your emotions or energy level, even with some of the natural ups and downs of business? And not just that, but when you're traveling, because when you're traveling,
Yeah.
now you're throwing, for me, I live in this calm house. So I have like one extra element but when you're traveling, you're like, where am I going to sleep? Is my plane delayed? Like, how have you managed your emotions and your work, even with the changes of life, of business, and of traveling, I guess?
Oh man, this is something that I've been trying to figure out still. I just spent about 10 months in Asia this last year, and that was probably the first time where I really went abroad and I was like, all right, I'm just working. I'm not going to do much traveling. I'm just pretty much living, in Asia. And it was hard. It was so hard. I don't know how some of these people do it. And to be fair, I think it helps when you have a team. Had I already had my editor, then, or like my whatever teammates that I have, then it would have been so much better.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
because
But it was just you.
just me.
Yeah.
So in those moments, I had to really focus on things that I enjoyed or that made me happy. So that way I could show up in my business to help my clients. Because if I wasn't mentally okay, then I just knew that my business would take a hit. So I did a lot of meditating, did yoga. I went to the beach as much as possible, just outdoor, being in nature, grounding myself. It's something that like I just kind of blew past before, but I was like, this is so important, especially kind of like what you said with all of the constant moving, having to deal with visas, possibly getting visas rejected. It just so many things. And it took me a second to really figure it out. And I had to kind of pour into myself more. And my business had to take a little bit of a backseat so that I could reevaluate what the heck I was doing and what direction I wanted to go and how I could be most helpful to my clients. And so now I feel like I'm in a much better mindset, but then it was really hard. So it was like me just focusing on, okay, how can I better myself? Because I think kind of what I was mentioning earlier is that a lot of things that I hadn't worked on before came up and needed to be figured out in order for me to be a better business owner. And yeah, it's been a learning experience for sure. I'm still figuring out a flow, but I feel like I'm in a better place as far as like where I want to go in my business, how I'm trying to present myself and but also continue traveling, all the things.
Yes. I love it. Okay, so back to the traveling part.
Oh, yes.
Tell us all, like, what countries have you lived in? Like, because I don't even know if I know all of them.
Oh, so I lived in New Zealand and Australia. That's where I initially started. I've spent last 10 months. I spent a month in Bali. I lived 5 months in Vietnam. I think 3 months in Thailand. And then I did some little trips to Singapore, Japan, and I think that's it. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's wild and amazing. I mean, when you say it, are you like, wow, that's amazing? Or are you like, no big deal because all your peers kind of did that too?
No, I hate to say that it's no big deal because sometimes I have to pinch myself to be like,
Yeah.
what the heck? Like, I did that. Like,
You did?
heck yeah. You know, 'cause
Oh my
that's something that was like such a big dream for me. And I used to look at that period of time, be like, man, if only I could do that. And here I am doing that, thankfully, because of my job. It's like, it blows my mind. And I never want to be that person that's like, oh, I spent a week in Europe, you know, or a month in here. You know, I don't want to be that person.
But you did.
Yeah.
But you did.
Yeah. But like, I just, it's when you do it so often, you do obviously becomes normalized. But yeah, I'm very grateful for having that opportunity.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me a story of like one of your favorite memories. What's been one of your favorite memories in one of those places?
Man, this is going to be a hard one.
Like, let me sort
Yeah.
through. It can be small. It can
Well,
be
okay.
anything.
This is more of well, I wouldn't say general memory, but when I first started traveling, I went to Bali and went for a month. And the first time I was backpacking. And when I first got there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. How do people live here and work here? And what do they do? It was the first time I'd ever even seen anyone be a digital nomad or whatever you want to call them, just working remote. And I remember being mind blown. I was like, what do you mean you live here? Like, what? How did you get your job? How can I do that? You know? And I told myself that was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to be a digital nomad or I'm going to be working remotely. I don't know how the heck I'm going to do it, but I know I'm going to come back here. I'm going to make it happen. And then just this last 10 months, I went back to that same city where I said that and I almost cried. I was like, oh my God, like I made this happen and I cannot believe this is real. There were so many moments where I was just sitting there staring at just the rice fields. I mean, like, I did it. Oh my gosh. You know, it's such a big win that I could so easily just overlook because I've made it become my lifestyle, you know, to be able to work from anywhere and travel to these places. And to be honest, I do it because it makes more financial sense for me at this time because these places are much more affordable and I get to experience the culture and meet the people and eat their amazing food. And oh my gosh, I love food. So it's been so heartwarming.
I love that too, that you had that full circle moment. Cause I think so much as entrepreneurs in the day to day of business, we can just always feel like life or business sucks because we always have another goal or benchmark or something we're working towards. Right. So I think those first circle moments of like, oh, actually I have progressed. Actually, I am doing the thing. It's interesting too, because I told my coach something similar to what you said to yourself at the beginning of my journey, which is like, I don't know quite what I'm going to do. I don't know what type of coach I'm going to be. I don't know, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I just knew that, like, once I found out about the coaching world, I was like, I think I want to do this. Like, I don't know what it'll look like, but that's what I want. And I'm going to figure it out. And I think that mindset is so important. And people forget to have that mindset. Because what I was hearing and what you said was like, I might have successes and failures. I might have to shift and pivot. I might have to do a job that I don't want to do for a second. Like, but I don't care. We don't get precious about it. I think when people start to get precious, like, I'm going to do this in this way and in this timeline, and it kind of like what you were saying about the podcast.
Yes.
If it doesn't happen in 30 days, then bye. Instead, we were like, F it. This is what I want. I don't care how long it takes. Obviously, I like it to happen faster than shorter.
Right.
But like, I'm going to do it. And I think that is the detachment piece that helps us get success faster.
100%. I think that is like the key to everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's much easier to accept that once you've seen it work for you because it's so easy. Like if you're not open to that, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, easy for them to say they've already been there. But there was a time where I was like, nah, that I'm never going to get to that level. I'm never going to be that kind of person. They get to travel. Like, that's so cool. I don't know if I'm ever going to do that. And then it happened. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm capable of this too? Okay, you know? And so then you just see like, okay, let's see. We'll see where we go, you know? And I think having the right people around you also helps because I started to surround myself with people who are like, yeah, let's just go with the flow. Like, you know, I was living in Australia for a little bit and I had a friend be like, we're on Australia time. Like, it's okay, you know? And I was like, this anxious person, like, what do you mean? I need to know where we're going, you know? And then all of a sudden I'm like leaving Australia, yeah, it's fine, or it's Australia time. And then things really did start. It was almost like I became a magnet to things that just started happening. I remember thinking thoughts of like, oh, I really like I want this to happen, or that'd be so cool. And then it would happen, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I'm not trying to be all like weird, with the vibes here, but something just started clicking where like I started meeting people that were my people, or like these opportunities started showing up that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I'd be capable of that. And so all of these little, I call them little glimmers, have really built my confidence over time that I can accomplish things. Not saying that I'm always thinking that. Like, there's definitely moments where I'm like, oh man, I'm back to ground zero. But knowing that I have those things happen in the past, it's like, okay, it'll happen again.
Yeah.
Got to detach, and then it'll happen. It always does. It's weird.
It's so true. I love that. As we wrap up, tell us, like, if people have been listening to you and they're like, oh my gosh, Alexis is amazing and has this most beautiful energy. I want her behind the scenes on my podcast, on my team. Maybe just talk briefly about how people can connect with you and or learn more about your services.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram, which is Archuleta Virtual. Archuleta is my last name, and it's Archuleta. I'm on Instagram, same LinkedIn, and I have a link on my Instagram to my email list, which I share lots of podcasting tips, my experiences, what I'm learning from clients, just basically helping whoever I can just with their podcast in a way that's non-intrusive. What's the word? Like, no pressure really. I just spitting facts.
Yes.
But yeah.
That's why I love you, Alexis, because I feel like you are so dependable, so reliable. So anyone that has you on their podcast team is lucky to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you have any parting words for us?
I do think that if you want to start a podcast and you just feel it in yourself that you got to start it, then I'm not saying don't start it. You should start it, but just know that it's going to take time. And as long as you can be patient and just go with the flow and just be willing to evolve, I think, it'll happen the way it's supposed to happen, whatever your goal is for the podcast.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for hanging out today. Please hit that subscribe button so you can make sure to stay updated anytime a new episode drops. And I would love for you to join me in my free Facebook community. It's called The Heart-Centered Entrepreneur. We discuss the podcast episodes. I regularly go live and do free trainings. And you may even meet your newest biz bestie. So you can join at heartcenteredcommunity.com. It's absolutely free, and I cannot wait to see you in there.